speaker is Dermot from the Anti-Internment Group of Ireland. He primarily works against state repression where people are arrested and detained without trial. The Anti-Internment Group supports other important campaigns such as the Craigavon 2, who were unjustly convicted, and also essentially working for other Irish political prisoners.
Shukran. Well, this is the second time I've spoken at one of these meetings. The other one was just a little bit earlier in the week. And I had to depart from what I had decided to say on that occasion because I was hearing things that reminded me so much of my own time in England. They reminded me of England London in the 70s and in the 80s. The Prevention of Terrorism Act was passed in 1974 in London after an unfortunate bombing that the warning went wrong and a whole lot of people were killed. And that year another few bombs were made in London as well. Now, it was clear that the people in this case, the Birmingham bombing, didn't want the people to die, but this was a time before mobiles, and they were looking for a phone box. All the phone boxes were broken in the area, and people died. I don't excuse it, but that's what happened. Within 24 hours, the Prevention of Terrorism Act was passed. It was obvious that that Prevention of Terrorism Act had been lying around, waiting for the occasion in which to pass it, and unfortunately, the IRA had given them that occasion, and they passed it. After they passed that act, which was supposedly, by the words, prevention of terrorism, supposed to prevent terrorism, they started raiding Irish people's houses. They started stopping people at airports, started stopping people on boats. People would be detained, disappear a couple of days, sometimes a week. They'd be excluded from the country. And by the way, people from the 6 counties, which the British claim is part of the UK, would be exiled from one part of the UK to another part of the UK. It seems that boundaries and borders are no problem when it comes to the state exercising what it wants to exercise. And I tell you, this had nothing to do with ending terrorism. Not one single person was ever arrested during all the years of the Prevention of Terrorism Act on a charge of terrorism, except 2 people. One of whom had some literature and the other who had some badges in his house. Some people were arrested for stolen property or something like that. Hundreds of thousands of people were never convicted of anything, but they'd been stopped and they'd been held. And those are figures of people who've been held for more than 24 hours. This was a reign of terror. It wasn't to prevent terrorism, it was actual terrorism. It was terrorising the Irish community. And we told the people in Britain, and we told the ethnic minorities too, the other ethnic minorities, of which ours was the biggest at that time, that if you don't stand up against this, it will come for you too. And it has. Unfortunately, the left in Britain didn't feel able to stand up against it. Once the state started throwing words like terrorism around and raiding people's houses, kicking people's doors down at 2 o'clock in the morning, they suddenly decided that this was not the state that they'd been prepared to overthrow in the first place. Or it was, but now they weren't going to. And so they left us alone to face it. Some people here and there did stand up. I mentioned Gareth Pearce. Gareth Pearce took a bit of convincing, by the way, before she took up cases. There were a few others as well. Some MPs asked questions. That's how we have those statistics on how many people were arrested and or detained under the Prevention of Terrorism Act and never charged with anything. And a few other people did as well. But by and large, the community was left to fight on its own. And this is what they want to happen now with the so-called war on terror. They want the Muslims to be left to fight alone. They want to divide the Muslims from everybody else. I'm an atheist myself. I don't believe in any religion. But I do believe in rights. I believe in human rights. And I believe in the rights of people to practice their faith or not practice their faith, whatever it may be, and not receive any kind of persecution because of it. But it's clear that the state has chosen to unleash a raison of terror on people, and they're calling it the war on terror. It is actually a war of terrorism. It's terrorism against a community, just like the Prevention of Terrorism Act was terrorism against our community. In the 6 counties of Ireland, which some of you might get used to calling Northern Ireland, but we don't call it that, because if you look at the map, Northern Ireland is actually Donegal, and these are the 6 counties out of 32 that was all one country when the British ruled it up until 1920. There's a different administration there, and quite a lot of people there have also been arrested under a similar legislation. This legislation that they have in the 6 counties allows the police, the colonial police, the used to be called the Royal Ulster Constabulary, and now they're called the Northern Ireland Police Force, but they're still the same people. They can pick you up on the street and they can question you, and they can detain you, and they can give you a lot of problems if you don't give them answers, even though there's no reason why they should be arresting you or hassling you in the first place, because you're not breaking any law, you're just stating your difference of opinion. Of course, if you state your difference of opinion, for instance, on the issue of the Good Friday Agreement, then you're a dissident. And dissident is now becoming a word something like terrorist. But what dissident means is that you don't agree with something. That's all it means. I remember hearing the other day the talk of one of the comrades was talking from Manchester about his father, the one that campaigns about Mr. Munir, being arrested and jailed for life because of something he said. I have to think, what possible thing could you say? You know, just try and imagine, what could you say that would deserve a life sentence? Suppose you threatened to kill somebody. I mean, that would be a pretty nasty thing to do. But would it deserve a life sentence? Just a threat? Just words? How come people can go to prison for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or never even go to prison for much, much worse things than that? Say, for instance, that you said you wanted to kill somebody, and I don't think Mr. Munir said that, but supposing he said, for instance, like in this country, I want to kill Enda. I want to kill Enda Kenny. He'd have to stand in line with a few 100,000 people who would be convicted for the same crime. Or even worse, suppose he said, I want to kill Joan Burton. Joan Burton's not just the most hated woman in Ireland, probably the most hated person in Ireland, which is a government minister. And I assure you there's plenty of people saying that they were going to kill her. And they're saying it on Facebook. And they're putting their name on it. And there even be tapes saying it. They're not going to jail though. Not yet, anyway. In the 6 counties in Ireland, people are being terrorised because they have difference of opinion. They're not being arrested because they're Muslims, they're not being arrested because they're Christians, they're being arrested because they're Republicans and they don't agree with the Good Friday Agreement. I'll give you 3 examples of the kind of things that happen. And by the way, one of those is on trial today, well, up in court today. She was out on bail, waiting trial, but they decided she wasn't complying with her bail requirements. They constantly harassed her. She was complying with them, but they were constantly harassing her, and in the end she said that she didn't want to comply with them anymore, so they arrested her and said that she wasn't complying with them, and now she's back in jail. I don't know how that case went today.
She got bail again.
She got bail again. Glad to hear that. So, the first case I'm going to tell you about is someone who is a member. These are all members of different organisations, by the way. They're not even from the same organisation. So this person is a woman, and by the way, maybe you'd like to change your thing to brothers and sisters behind bars someday. I know that brothers and bars and prison all that start with B, and it's a nice bit of what do you call it? Alliteration, yeah. Which is a great thing in Irish poetry, apparently. But when it leaves out women, it's not such a good thing. And we're quite conscious that we've been doing that for many years here too. Anyway, this was a woman who had been arrested before and had done time and had been released under the Good Friday Agreement. She'd been released under the Good Friday Agreement, but she didn't agree with it. So she carried on speaking against it, and she carried on saying that you know, Britain was still being ruled by Ireland was still being ruled by Britain, and Britain should get out. And she spoke at a meeting, and then after that she had spoken, she held a piece of paper for somebody else to read. Now this piece of paper was apparently a message from the IRA, and because she held that piece of paper, she was colluding with terrorism, and they arrested her. Now I have to tell you that it's nothing unusual for a member of the IRA to address a meeting around Easter in Ireland. It happens all over the country. This is Easter celebrations, and it's a quite traditional thing that a member of the IRA would address the gathering. So anyway, just for holding that piece of paper, she was detained because she had been released under a license. They didn't need to charge her, and they didn't. But eventually they did decide to charge her, and all along they were refusing her bail. And it went through a big, long rigmarole, but I can tell you that after 2 years she was finally released, by which time she'd been in hospital, chained to beds while work was being done on her. She was finally released 2 years. She's completely broken in health, physical health and mental health. This is no weak woman. This is a woman who endured 135 days of force feeding in a British jail. But they finally broke her. The other one I'll just tell you about is a man who, because of his activities, was being harassed by the state, that's the colonial state in Uri, and he was taking pictures of the harassment he was getting, and he was taking pictures of the harassment other people were getting as well. And he was building up quite a file in it, and he was putting it out on Facebook. And in fact, one time he had a reporter with him who was asking him about his persecution, and he was in a car, and guess what? They got stopped by the police, and you can hear the whole harassment being recorded by the reporter in the car, and the cop didn't even realise. But he was arrested and charged with preparing for terrorism, having information of use to terrorists. I reckon any information must be of use to terrorists. I mean, if you have a bus timetable, that must be of use to terrorists. Shopping list could be of use to terrorists. I mean, what information would not be of use to a terrorist? Hard to imagine one. But apparently these were his photographs of police harassment. Well, there's a very simple answer to that. Stop harassing people, and no one will be taking your pictures. But that's not the answer that they came up with. So they charged him with that, and they charged him with having a weapon, a gun. The gun was what they call in the United States a BB gun, and here we call it a pellet gun, of his son. Now, I can assure you that in all our years of experience, when people have gone out to fight the British Army and the police, they haven't gone out with pellet guns. I can tell you that. Trust me, that's absolute truth. They also accused him of having a uniform. Now, I would imagine, and you would imagine, that if you're going to be a terrorist, whatever that means, let's say a guerrilla fighter or whatever, and you're fighting in an urban area, you're not going to go around wearing a uniform. But that's what he was charged with, and the uniform was a band uniform, one of these marching bands that Republicans have. And if that wasn't enough, they finally got him arrested him, just in case all those other things would fall, with malicious damage. And the malicious damage was spraying a slogan on the wall. But they didn't have the wall, and they didn't have the slogan. What they did have was a stencil they found in his house. So, don't keep any stencils in your house. But this is all very funny, but it's not very funny because he got locked up and refused bail, because he's a terrorist, and that automatically happens. You go to jail and you don't get bail. And then finally, after a long time of campaign, they did offer him bail, but they offered him bail under conditions that he didn't reside in his hometown, didn't live in his own house with his own child, that he wore one of those tags, electronic tags, that he signed on the police station every day, wasn't allowed to make phone calls, etc., etc. A whole load of absolute infringements on almost every civil right you can think about. And to his credit, he refused. So he was another 6 months in prison. And then finally his trial came up, actually another 8 months. Finally his trial came up and he was found not guilty on everything. But he spent a year and 2 months in prison. And the third case I want to tell you about, and the last one of these, is another man from another organisation who had also been a previous prisoner and was released on licence. And he also didn't agree with the Good Friday Agreement. But whereas the woman who didn't agree with the Good Friday Agreement got charged with something, and the guy in Uri got charged with something, however ridiculous it might be, they didn't even charge him. They just took him to jail. He never even had a police interview. He spent 4 years in that jail until finally they let him out under some kind of deal, and he's not allowed to talk about it. So this is this is what they call a democracy. And I ask myself, if it is a democracy, who's it a democracy for? Because it's certainly not a democracy for the ordinary people in the world. It might be a democracy for the other people, the people who run it, the people who make money from it, the people who are the real terrorists in this world. Because when you look around the world, who is it who causes millions of people to die through wars, through aggression, through proxy wars as well as direct wars and invasions, through manipulating food prices, through ripping off countries' natural resources and paying corrupt officials to run it for them, and of course arming them, because this isn't going to be easy, is it? This is what terrorism is, and it's imperialism. Imperialism is terrorism, but they have the cheek to tell us that they are protecting us from imperialism, from terrorism, when in fact they are practicing it. It is important for us. Oh, I didn't mention also that people who go to prison are accused of terrorism are badly treated in prison too. As it's not bad enough that they're in prison when they're innocent, they're also badly treated inside. Strip searches and invasions of their bodily orifices every time they leave the prison and every time they come back, even if they've never seen anybody except prison officers or a lawyer in between. There's another one who's been over 2 years in solitary confinement. The state says that they're doing that for his own good, to protect him from IRA who want to beat him up or something. That's very considerate of them, except that all the political prisoners have said they have no problem with him being on their landing at all. And he says he wants to go on their landing. So they're the only ones who are saying he can't go on their landing, but they've been asking him to be an informer, so that might have something to do with it. So, when we're faced with these things around the world, we need to ask ourselves, what can we do about it? And I think what we can do about it is two things. One, we can stand up for our own rights and for the rights of our neighbours. And the other thing is we can extend the hand of friendship to others who are suffering around the world as well. Because trust me, the imperialists and the enemies of humanity do stretch out a hand to one another. Come on.